welcome everybody. This is SharePoint Developer Ecosystem / PMP community call, and this is the September 2019 edition. It is September 10th, 2019. Autumn is arriving on the Northern Hemisphere clearly. And it's getting colder and colder, at least in Finland, and it was super rainy actually in Seattle. That's what I know from the weekend as well. Now let's actually get started on today. Well, actually, before I go do that, so my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a principal program manager in the SharePoint Developer OneDrive SharePoint development platform team, and basically my team is responsible for SharePoint Framework and the development experiences. Now we work closely together with all of the other teams, for example, with out-of-the-box Webpart teams who use the SharePoint Framework to build out-of-the-box experiences, which is really, really cool. So this is basically first time ever as part of the, let's say, SharePoint development history. You as an external and a third-party developer are building your extensibility using exactly the same tooling as we built using the first-party experiences. And that's great because that means that you can rely on the SharePoint framework to exist in the future as well. So there's no kind of a concerns for us suddenly introducing a new model or whatever that would actually mean in this scenario. Now let me actually get moving on the slides. So if I can get slides moving. So agenda for today: few slides and updates on the, let's say, the latest news, a monthly summary, and other few details. So making sure that everybody is aware of what has happened within the last month. Some of the slides are recap from the previous community calls, and that's by design. So if you miss some of the calls, we'll definitely talk about the main movement and main updates in these monthly calls as well. Then we'll kind of have a look on the list of community contributors and companies within the last month. So it is again a massive list of people who are contributing on our community and open source efforts in the documentation or the code sample side of the house. So thank you already advance on that one. Now, and then we'll move to this main topic of today, which is out-of-the-box web parts. And John Sanders, who's principal program manager from the SharePoint engineering side, has kind of covered that. So it's around latest capabilities and improvements, talk about roadmap, and then ask anything. We'll answer anything. No, we'll answer hopefully our question, not just anything related on what you're asking. But the whole point is that we're kind of repositioning these monthly calls to be more on a specific topic. So last time we had a discussion around the future of SharePoint Framework together with Luca and Pat Miller. This time we're going to have a discussion around the first-party web parts because that actually came up last month. So John is going to present the latest on that one, and then we'll probably have Melissa coming with site designs, for example, in month from now. Oh, actually, DC is coming in October, and then probably Melissa in November to talk about modern experiences and site designs and site scripts and all of that stuff. If we will have time, we'll have an open discussion and Q&A in the end. To be fair, the chat window is typically quite active, so especially during the ask me anything, you can ask anything and we'll answer definitely on your question as much as possible. On the top right corner, by the way, I don't know how small the screen is, so you can see John Sanders' Twitter picture, which is actually quite impressive. So he seems to be eating fire, so he can talk about his hobbies, hopefully, when he starts his presentation as well. Now, a few updates and just recap how we work within the SharePoint Developer Community. We have different layers of this community. So first we have the SharePoint Developer Community channel in the Microsoft Tech community. This is meant to be the primary channel for asking questions and getting questions answered openly. There was actually recently, as recently as today, somebody was asking, why don't you have a Yammer channel for the dev questions? And the answer is Yammer questions and answers would not be crawled by Google or Bing. So it's much more efficient to have a separate forum which is accessible by anonymously, and that means that it's available then in the search results when you're trying to find results, whatever question you're trying to find. We also have two different bi-weekly community calls. We have the bi-weekly SharePoint Framework community call and bi-weekly SharePoint General Dev. The difference between these are we cover SharePoint Framework topics with community demos, and the other one is all the rest except SharePoint Framework. So CSAM, SharePoint provisioning, Microsoft Graph, Power Apps, and Microsoft Flow integration, and all of that. And then we have these monthly community calls, and like I said, already in the start, we kind of slightly realigned these to be more on, let's say, Microsoft Presents and giving you updates on different areas of the SharePoint functionality and SharePoint platform. Because even though we are saying that SharePoint PnP is a SharePoint developer topic or community, you need to understand the basic functionalities which are available, so you don't implement extensibility for functionalities which are not needed. So it's super important to know what's available out of the box. A few URLs which we recap every single time. AKMS SP Dev Docs, our documentation. AKMS SP Dev Videos, our YouTube channel, where this video will be and recording will be available in 24 hours. And then AKMS SP Dev Issue List. If you have problems with an APIs and SharePoint developer topics and questions around that, please use the AKMS SP Dev Issue List. And that is a good location to report anything which is broken. And all of those issues are getting replicated to our internal system, and then we triage them, and then we jump on them if needed and if they're super urgent. Always dependent, obviously, also on the criticalness and availability of our resources. A quick recap on the numbers. We actually had the slide last week in the SharePoint Dev generic call. We had in the YouTube, we had 220,000 watch time minutes in last month. With 43,000 views. We had 52,000 unique visitors in GitHub, which is growing. Well, it grows in August. It actually, to be honest, it went slightly down, but that is as expected because it was a vacation period in the Northern Hemisphere of the world. Views in GitHub, 240,000. Views in Docs went under the 1 million, and again, as expected, because it's a August timeframe. But the PnP reusable component usage actually grew. So we broke 25,700 tenants using PnP PowerShell, PnP SiteScore, or PnP JS components, and they generated 16.4 billion requests. And the most used capability is the provisioning engine by far. Now, what about SharePoint Framework? We always keep on this slide in this course as well, just to give you an insight on the adoption. Adoption looks really good. We broke some milestones actually last week related on SharePoint Framework. We do not share exact numbers, what it means, but I can say that there are millions and millions and millions of people who are using SharePoint Framework based extensibility in SharePoint Online in their tenants. The reason why we don't give you an exact number is basically the fact that you wouldn't understand what that number means. So we have a kind of a slightly different way of calculating the usage. So it's not just how many users have touched a custom SPFX extensibility within the last month. It's slightly more complicated, standardized way of calculating that. And that's the reason why we don't give you an exact number, because the immediate follow-up question would be, what does it mean? But looking at the charts, you can see that we're on the right path. It has a small slowness on the summertime, but then it goes on the curve again. We did by the way, all-time record yesterday again on the SharePoint Framework usage on a day-to-day basis, which is pretty cool. And most likely today is going to have even more. A few updates from the last month. SharePoint Framework 1.9.1 is available. We released this in the later part of August. Which include then library components and additional other improvements as well. So you can actually take advantage of the latest version of React and latest versions of TypeScript and all of that stuff. So all of that is now improved in the SharePoint Framework side. Now, if you're not familiar with SharePoint Framework and you're still like, well, I need to learn what it is and why is it so cool, we updated our training package. So the September 2019 update for the SharePoint Framework training package came out last week. So if you write HTTPS AKMS SPFX training, you will find, I think it's 9 modules right now, unless I'm completely mistaken, with videos, hands-on labs, demos as well. So if you are a Microsoft certified trainer, or you have a training company, or you need to train your own team members, you can actually use the videos and demos and material to train the SharePoint Framework for them as well. Everything is for you to reuse any way we want. Now, a few other updates. Earlier today, we released the latest version of SharePoint Dev Weekly. We are now also releasing this as a podcast. So if you're looking into rather listening SharePoint Dev Weekly, where we cover latest news from Microsoft, latest news from community, from article side, and then we always have a visitor there as well. We talk about what's relevant for that particular visitor. This time, Kathy Du from our developer platform team joined, and Kathy owns the SharePoint branding and also SharePoint store. And so SharePoint Framework store and getting that to work. And we talked about those topics and also diversity and inclusiveness, where Kathy has been really active in the community as well. So really good chat. And on top of that, also latest blog posts and articles in here. And thank you, Linda, for the podcast comments. It's good to know that it's something what people prefer. I do understand that definitely. It's just an additional thing which we need to do, and we're getting kind of stressed on the stuff, all the stuff what we do. So, but releasing this as a podcast isn't a massive deal. Now, a few updates on the user voice, just to recap the situation in here. There is one quite important update here. So the item number 8, now I can actually draw here because I have this one. So item number 8 is now delivered. It is officially supported to actually write manage metadata via app-only policy. It has not yet been documented, but if you go to the user voice entry, it already says using my identity that, hey, this is supported and this is the way how to make that happen. So this is 100% supported option, and it will be supported in the future as well. Now, other parts in here, just a few notes. Support for .NET Core with CSAM. It will be .NET Standard, but that works in the .NET Store as well, Core as well. Current ETA is still this autumn. We should get the preview roughly in September. Well, today is September still, in October timeframe, but I can't promise that for as a exact date. But it seems to be that we might actually get to public preview in October, and that means that we will be able to get stuff out quite soon as well. So super important thing. On the managed metadata term store operations in REST API, that will be on the Microsoft Graph side of the house, and then there should be more announcements and news around that one in the Ignite timeframe. Ignite is on November this year, unless I'm completely mistaken. I think I've booked my flights at least for November, so hopefully that was the right time. And also maybe app source in the store, like mentioned, Kathy Du. We had the chat yesterday evening on my time, and the latest version of SharePoint Dev Weekly had a discussion around that one. There isn't that much around the store availability at this point yet. We can't give you an ETA, but it's being actively looked on. One of the reasons why we don't want to give you an ETA is that we don't want to anymore come back and say, well, yeah, we did miss that ETA, and it's going to be still further a few months. So we want to give you an ETA and an exact estimate whenever we're 100% sure that we can deliver the store on that time. Now, there is a quick question from Alex related on-premises capabilities on 2016-2019, most likely related on SharePoint Framework and the versions which are being used in on-premises. We talked about this quite a few times in the SharePoint Dev Weekly and in this course as well. You can basically expect that we're not going to update the SharePoint Framework versions for SharePoint 2016 or SharePoint 2019. The reasons are quite simply that if we would actually update the version, we would have to retest and redeploy and repackage the whole version, and that's a basically completely new version of SharePoint Framework for on-premises. So the amount of investments updating the SharePoint Framework version for 2016 or 2019 is massive, and that would actually be then SharePoint, what would it be? SharePoint 20, I don't know, what's the next on-premises version. So for now, there's no plans to use a newer version or release a newer version support for SharePoint 2016 or 2019, because technically it's pretty much impossible for us to make that happen. And if somebody needs to have more details on that, let's have a discussion. Why is that technically impossible in some another venue? Now, a few more updates before we go to the John Sanders screen and the demos. So much to talk about. SharePoint Dev ecosystem, the September 2019 update is now available. This is the monthly blog post where we actually mentioned all of the people who have contributed in our open source and community efforts during past month. And we call out all of the companies who've been active or letting their employees to participate on the open source initiatives as well. So this is now out. If you go to the SharePoint Dev blog, AKMS SP Dev-blog, you'll find it actually from there or the links from the social media. The people who contributed in the last month, the number of people is huge. So we had, again, well, actually, I haven't calculated the rows, but close to 100 people contributing within this month as well. As a documentation updates or code updates or other updates in the community, so helping others to succeed and basically giving back for the community around these toolings which community is building together with Microsoft. So, and thank you for all of your time you're spending with us on making the community be more successful together and helping others to succeed. Definitely, it's highly appreciated, and this makes all of us be more successful in our work. So super important thing as well. On the company side of the house, this is the company logos which I have a permission to use from those names which were on the previous slides. So we need to get an explicit permission to be able to use the logo. And thank you for these companies on giving their employees the option to actually contribute on the open source initiatives. So really highly appreciated, because that helps the whole community to grow and being more successful as well, everybody in the community. And also from the Microsoft side of the house, a lot of people been involved in here. Obviously, there's a lot of additional people behind of these people in the Microsoft as well. As an example, John Sanders isn't mentioned in here, but certainly John Sanders has a pretty big impact on the Webpart designs and experiences. But these are the people who've been actively last month contributed on the open source efforts. But that's it for the quick intros to get started, and then we should have John Sanders on the line.
I am not going to be able to watch the chat window while I'm doing our demos, but someone could work on that for me. I think we've got Andy on the phone as well.
Yep.
And okay, so let's start with what I'm going to be showing you today. So basically, we have released a ton of new features recently, some of which, or most of which, we demoed at the SharePoint conference, and they're covered in these two blog posts. So Vesa is going to have the links to these two blog posts available for you, but it's going to cover the features I'm going to cover, and then we'll do a couple of demos and answer any questions. And then I guess like Vesa did, so I've been here in the SharePoint team for about 3 years, and I'm responsible for our modern pages, the modern web parts that we create on them, and also our SharePoint News product. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some of our features. So one of the first features that we've been asked for quite a bit is the ability on longer form content to jump to specific places in the content, otherwise known as on-page anchors. So we've recently rolled that out on any heading in your rich text editor, whether it's an H1, 2, or 3. You will get an anchor that floats next to that heading, similar to other services like GitHub or our docs.microsoft.com. That then adds the anchor to the end of your URL as a standard anchor, and it jumps that to the top of the page. So if you wanted to, you could open that in a new tab or direct link to that deep anchor, and the page will load and then jump down to that piece of the page so that you can see it. So it's a feature we've been asked for quite a bit. That's available in 100% targeted release now. Most of the other features I'm going to demo today are all at 100% worldwide. So let's look at another frequently requested feature, which is in the highlighted content web part. Let's see, I guess I can open up the chat window. Who wants their and/ors and buts? No plus ones yet. I can't hear screaming on the phone, so you must.
I do.
Okay. So now in the highlighted content web part, and this is available 100% worldwide, you can go from basic filtering, where we give you all of the drop downs and options, to picking your source, and then depending upon your source, you can either enter KQL like I've done here, or if you have a camel query, you could enter camel, right? If your source was this site, you could then use either KQL or camel. And the query is pretty simple syntax. If I come back and I'll just click out of here, and I will bring it back to the not syntax I had. And the feature that I just showed you was undo. So I made some changes to this web part. I click out of the web part. I'm able to undo or redo my changes. In this case, all I did is mess up the query I had set up before. Let's see, I'll let other people answer the chat because otherwise I'm going to be distracted and try and answer your questions there. But so the two features we've shown so far are on-page anchors with deep linking, and then adding your own advanced query into the highlighted content web part, which could include nots, ands, ors, and they could obviously be grouped together. So let's drop that page and let's talk about some of our on-page anchoring improvements. So if I come to a page I've authored previously and I look at our text editor, I've got a couple of nice file web parts. We'll talk about these new web parts here in a second, as well as some of our enhancements to weather and the new world clock web part. But if I look over here, I've got this section that should obviously have some content in it. So one of those pieces of content looks like it should be a video. So if we come back to our stream video and I look at my content, let me just grab the URL for my stream video. And I am going to add that, but instead of going here to the toolbox and searching like I could for stream, which does work, or expanding the large toolbox and maybe going by category, looking at my text and media categories, which I could do, but sometimes when you're typing along and you're working, you just want to paste. And when you paste, we now add the embed video for stream or YouTube. In the future, we'll add more, but at the moment, those two work, as well as other URLs work, but don't provide a rich embed. They provide a preview of the page, similar to something like you'd get in Teams when you paste a URL. You don't get the full rich embed, but you do get a highlight with a title and a description of the web part. The other thing that I really prefer to do when I'm authoring content is if I grab some image content, which I'll move onto my screen instead of keeping it off, and I want this image here, again, I could come over here and say image today, and I'd get my file picker experience, which works well, but I think instead of that, it'd be easier if I could just drag and drop the content. So let's do that with a couple of images, and we'll add those to the page here. So we've got drag and drop of content. That works for files as well as images. As well, we have pasting of a URL into the rich text editor. We'll either give you a preview of the URL if one's available, or if it's YouTube or stream, we'll put in the full rich video for you. Trying to make that authoring experience that much easier and require less opening of the toolbox and picking web parts. In the future, you could imagine we open this up to other web parts. We call this experience our content handler experience. So we do plan on augmenting it in the future, but we started with the things that people use the most.
John, sorry, yeah. There's a lot of questions related on where are the images uploaded? So where are they heading? That's jumping on that one because it was asked quite a few times on the chat.
Sure, great. So our general rule for pages falls into two buckets for documents and images. When documents are added to a page through the file picker or through the content handler, the same path is followed. Those documents are added to the documents library on the site. when images are added to a page, so anywhere on a page, either manually through the file picker or again using the content handler, they're added to site assets. We create a subfolder in site assets with the page name, and then all assets on that page, all image assets on that page are stored in that folder.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. And again, how you add content doesn't change the destination of where that content goes, right? So as you add documents, they go to the documents folder. As you add images, they go to site assets. In the future, we have been asked a few times if documents could also go to site assets. If you have feedback on that, I'd love to hear it. This is how Modern Pages has worked since the beginning. The documents go to the documents library. But some people that have very large sites with many, many people have argued that they'd like to be able to put that in site assets and hide it from the document library. At the moment, we don't have plans to change that, but would love feedback if you have it. Okay, so we've covered drag and drop, and we covered adding URLs. We did multiple images and single image. And we've actually shown undo redo because I've used Control-Z, but just for the purposes of pulling you in, I can also use the undo button, or I can use my Control-Y, Control-Z. If you're on a Mac, that converts to Command-Y, Command-Z. So if I want to add those things back. Okay, so let's talk about some other new web parts in particular. These were all about page capabilities. If we come up to some of our new web parts, right here, we've got our button web part. And sometimes it might seem a little simple, but a lot of people have asked us since we launched Modern Pages, hey, I used to use the content editor web part and stick a little bit of script on my page, and really all I wanted to do was make a button with some words and a link to it. So how do I do that? So as you know, from a security perspective, we have scripting requires you to either disable some features or create your own SPFX web parts, which I'm guessing most of you do. So instead of that, we took that use case and made it into a simple web part. The web part has a label, you can add a link, and then left, right, and center it. Similar to that web part with slight additional functionality is actually the call to action web part, which sometimes people also refer to as the banner web part. So here you can have a main title that you could edit, as well as a button with a link, and then you can change the alignment. As well, on the image that you've uploaded, you have the same features that we have in title region and in the hero web parts, trying to keep our image experiences more consistent. We could set a focal point on that image, or we could zoom in or zoom out of that image if we wanted to show a particular element. So that's our call to action web part. And then up here are the button web parts. Okay, now let's talk about our world clock web part. Pretty simple concept, but for people that run teams around the world, it's quite nice to be able to list those teams here. So as an example, our web parts team is actually in China, and they are quite a bit ahead of us, as you could see. So now would not be a good time to call and ask for some help. But it is 11:30. It is a nice idea to be able to list out your various partner locations so that you could see them in comparison to you. What we did when we created this web part is we went back and retrofitted our weather web part so that it would be consistent and be able to line up so that you could have the same weather as well as time next to each other. So we'll come down here, we'll add the same. And now I've got a nice listing of not only the weather in Vegas, but also in Suzhou and Hyderabad. Questions on any of those web parts? So we've got our button, updated weather, new world clock, or call to action web parts.
There's a question about personalizing the weather web part, weather near me.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so good question, Daniel. At the moment, that isn't in our plans. If that's something that you want to see, we could certainly talk about it and add it into our backlog. One of our first designs actually started with that, sort of the idea that I would own a page and it would always be relative to me. What we found when we tested it inside Microsoft is it didn't really match the user expectation. They expected to create a page and be able to define different locations, but it would look consistent for people. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. That was just some of our early feedback. So we put that into the backlog kind of deep and started with this more simple model. And then I see a couple of other questions related to it. Location label text. What's the question? Oh, can you edit location for weather or clock? Can you expand on the question? Like, can I rename this to be my Hyderabad? Like this?
Yes.
Yay, except my spelling's terrible, so let's not do that.
Does it support 24-hour time format?
Good question. I believe it follows your site format, your site time zone. So if your site is set to 24-hour, it would support 24-hour. And yes, Mike, Vegas office, I just did that. Hopefully you saw it. Although for Hyderabad, that's a little weird. And time, yep, it does support either Fahrenheit or Celsius.
I think you're good, John. I got the rest if something else comes up.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we've covered the 3 new web parts and the update. We've talked about highlighted content now having and ors. So let's talk about a couple of additional page features, but I'm going to show it to you on a different tenant here. So I'm going to pull up an example page from a team site. And what you're going to notice here on the right-hand side is that's actually a vertical section added to this page. And I show it on a team site because our typical demos have it more on the home site of a team and have it in the main on a main communication site. So I often get asked, is it possible to do it on any page? And absolutely it is. So let's move some of these web parts around and see how you would add a vertical section. So I can edit this section just like I could any other section. So I can add section background color, maybe super bright reds. I have a designer on the phone. She's going to laugh at me later. I'm not supposed to do things like that after she spent so much time building a beautiful site. But we can move and rearrange web parts. So we'll pull out some of these web parts and then
Did we lost the audio?
no, I'm just not talking.
Yeah, okay.
Keep up with us.
That's the
I don't
yeah. So
keep up a
it's
standard monologue like YouTube is. Sorry.
sorry. It's the number one learning in all of this is the same learning as in radio. No dead air time, because otherwise people get confused. So
all right. Well, I'll just keep talking then. So why don't we just delete this section at the moment? And I'm going to whack those remaining web parts. Like any section, if you delete a section and it has web parts in it, those web parts get deleted as well. So how I would add my vertical section is I can come over and I get the option for vertical section. If I was on a communication site, I would have another option here, which is full width section. The two, full width and vertical section, cannot be on the same page. So if I add a vertical section here, and then I add web parts just like I would in any other vertical section. So I could also drag and drop content to those web parts, just like I did on the other page. So if I come over here and I drag some content, I can drag those images to it. I can also move web parts to that content. Oh, it looks like I didn't actually drop. Sorry, my bad. And then I will move some other web parts over to that section as well. All right, always fun to have some demo experiences that don't work delightfully. So I'm going to just skip to the next demo and we'll move on from there. So one other update from a web parts perspective that we often get asked for is in the news web part, we get asked to add new layouts, and particularly people that like the visual feel of the hero web part wanted this layout. So we added this to the news web part. We're using it in our own demo tenants for Contoso News. Here, there we go. Okay, so just like news had before, we had these 5 layouts. One of them quite frequent or quite popular is the carousel layout. The tiles layout, however, just brings in the hero capabilities and you can adjust it as you want. The reason that I'm clicking the apply feature down here, which maybe you're not used to in news, is if you have applied filters in the news web part, we don't immediately refresh the settings. So if you add the filters section, an apply button appears, and then as you make changes, that apply button needs to be clicked to make those changes appear. Typically, if I had removed all filters, then as I made changes up here, they would immediately show up on the main page. One other thing I'll point out while I'm here, it is a feature we launched earlier this year, but you'll notice that these visual highlights, these are websites that are defined as organization news. So in this case, we've got the leadership connection site. If I configure a web part to pull content from select sites, or if the user is configured to pull from recommended, and one of the sites I've selected is an Oregon News site, you'll see this visual styling on that, as well as in the SharePoint mobile app and on the SharePoint start page. Okay, so we've talked about vertical sections. We've talked through a bunch of our new web part capabilities. One feature I didn't actually show you earlier, which is kind of a nice feature because it simplifies page layout creation. So if I come down to my page and I'm going to discard the changes I just made, and then I'm going to do something that you might have wanted to do in the past. Instead of recreating content, maybe you want to show this content in 2 places, or potentially you want to bring additional weather and time zones to another place. You can now click the duplicate button. Duplicate works on sections. It also works on web parts. Okay, so just going through my pretty big list of fun stuff to look at. Let's do one other fun feature that we...
John, sorry to interrupt. If you have a chance to show a footer, there seems to be some excitement and energy around seeing the footer. I know that would be an audible from what you've got in your plan, but if one of these sites has a site footer, there seems to be some interest.
Okay. Great. I will have to look at that unless you happen to know a site in our 005A tenant. I'll come back to that. I think I know where one is. Okay. Let me open up. If we come back to this site, and I'm going to discard my changes here. And then we're going to go to, I'm going to go to just a page. I guess I'll use this site because I can see that it's already working. So one of the things that we showed at SPC is recommendations for viewers of the page. And the thing about recommendations is obviously you need content. So since these are demo environments, I only have 2 pieces of content that's showing up on this page. On some other pages, I'll be able to show you, this would normally be a carousel of 4 pieces of content, which would flip once and show you 4 more pieces. But what we're using is our machine learning and the graph based on users that you work with and other visitors of this site to show you what other people viewed. So let's say I work really closely with Andy and Vesa. If they had all clicked this article about the giving campaign and community empowerment, it would be a recommendation for me. And instead here of saying there were 32 people that read this next, it would say people that you work with. I think it might even actually say Andy and or Vesa read this next. And the idea is that we're trying to make the content you create, these durable, beautiful pages on SharePoint, get more engagement for readership, not only on your own detailed page, but also on other pages on your same site. So in this case, I've got a couple of actions here. One is I can say, hey, I don't have time to read this right now, so I'm going to save it for later. It goes into my save for later list, which obviously works on the SharePoint mobile app, in the SharePoint start page. And then we also have a web part that lets you show content that's saved for later. That's recently gone to targeted release. I might be able to demo that here in a little bit if we don't have too many more questions. And then the other thing that we have here, because we want really good recommendations for you, is we have a way to say, I don't like this recommendation. It was a bad recommendation. And I can hide that recommendation and give us feedback that it wasn't good. And that helps train the algorithm that while we thought it was interesting for you, you didn't think it was interesting. Okay. Let's see. I think I am through my primary demos here. So let me open it back up for questions. And while we do that, I'm going to go look for a footer.
There's one on the Sales Hub or the Marketing Hub, I think Katie said also.
Okay. In which tenant, Katie? Keynote or?
She just said, cool. She just said a link.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 5.7 site/marketing is the.
Hold on. Yep. Thanks, Katie. Ooh, that is a beautiful site. Okay, as we come down here, we can see all this great content that Katie's built out on this site for us. It's still loading a bunch of content. It's a very dense page. Got a nice section background here with some images, or I should say our icon library. We're using our icon library for these quick links. And we've got a collection of interesting sites that will be useful to the Contoso sales team, some nice events. These are documents. This looks probably like our My Documents website or our My Documents web part.
It's actually all for the hub. So those are all the popular documents in the hub.
Excellent. All right. And now we've gotten down towards the bottom of the page, and you can see we have this nice footer with a logo and the company name. And then these various links.
So, John, there's a couple of questions that maybe we can go over from the chat that I haven't gotten to. One is, when might we see dynamic data in the out-of-box web parts? Filter one list based on items selected from another.
So we actually have that to, let me think, two lists filtering each other. So we have dynamic data working in the embed web part, as well as with list as a data provider and embed as a consumer. Also, the file web part and the image web part are both consumers as well. List to list, I'm not sure where that's at in the backlog, but I don't believe it's out yet. And then other web parts that you'd like to have support dynamic data, if you could send us details on what you exactly are looking for, and I'm not talking about pages and pages of documentation, just I imagine my scenario is this web part is the data provider. Often people use lists for that. And then I imagine connecting these three web parts to it, and here's why. And that would be very helpful for us as we look at a next investment in dynamic data.
There's a lot of interest in the table of contents web part. Since this is a kind of a public call, I said stay tuned. I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Yeah, so we've worked on a table of contents web part internally, and we have it working inside Microsoft. There was some design discussion as we played with it, because as you know, we always prioritize quality over timeline, and we weren't happy with our first investment. So we've reimagined how it works, and the team's working on a new version of that inside Microsoft. And when we're happy with that quality, we will absolutely roll that out to you. So right now you can build a table of contents manually through using the on-page anchors and deep links, which I do occasionally for my status reports each month. But we will soon have a table of contents, but soon doesn't have a timeline related. It has quality.
And then there's a question around search related web parts. Any update on search related web parts like content search, search results, etc.?
Sure. So highlighted content uses search or camel today. Are you thinking more in terms of like search refiners or display templates, or I guess what are you looking for?
Devang, who asked that I may be mispronouncing it, if he wants to hit on chat, I'll cover it.
Okay.
And then public service announcement, folks. Way early in the chat, there was some feedback around having page templates work across sites. So if you want to upvote, you'll see one of them's got 9, one of them's got 4. If you want that functionality, upvote my post. That would be helpful feedback for us.
Yeah, absolutely. For the question on dynamic data earlier, this was the demo I did earlier. I can edit this page and we can take a look. So basically what I've got here, if I edit, is I have a list. I've added a number of SPCNA videos to this list. And then within the embed web part, instead of embedding a single embed, I'm connecting to the source, which is that list I created, SPCNA videos. And then in this iframe for my video that shows YouTube content, I'm using a token right here. So in this case, I want the video column. So I'm using $video link, which is the name of the column I created in my list. And now as I go through the list, getting it a little bit better view for you if I get out of my edit mode here. As I move through the list, our dynamic data will pull up the videos based on the video link token. When will I be able to use a URL as a source for dynamic filtering? In what context?
For search query web parts implementation, where you pinpoint to a URL and then in the URL as a query parameter, you have something like x equals y, and then that y can be set as a content query web part filter, and then the page will be fully dynamic. That's quite classic implementation.
Yeah, it is. I have seen some third-party implementations of a solution for that. At the moment, I would say that's relatively deep in our backlog. If you think it should be different than that, I'd love to hear about it. One of the, I'm trying to think, I'm pretty sure that the implementation is contributed to PMP as well. It was the great effort from a number of MVPs at Takeda Pharmaceuticals that did a query-based
that is definitely there. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so you could definitely look at it. Yeah, it's under the, it's not in the normal demo solutions. It's in something called solutions.
Yes,
exactly.
SPDev solution, because it's more production ready, not just a random sample. So to say, we're trying to kind of differentiate those as well. But yeah, so open source.
Okay. What other questions do we have? We have about 8 minutes.
One thing, but I wanted to pinpoint that was question. There was a question quite a few times on the chat around that one. All of the templates which you're seeing here are coming from Katie. Katie Swanson is also on the call. We actually have a Katie scheduled to do a design discussion slightly later on the public community calls as well. But these are lookbook template version 2 templates, and we are currently working on getting these available in the provisioning service and as an open source tenant template. So that means that anybody in the world can actually provision these kind of demo sites available with example content and structures and all of that that's available in their tenants. Right now, it is provisioning.sharepointbmp.com. We're looking into changing potentially the URL, make it more Microsoft-y and all of that, and that work is now progressing. Already today, if you liked our Ignite 2018 designs and SPC in North America designs based on Katie's work, that they are all available for you to provision as long as you're a tenant administrator. And maybe one point on that one as well. For the V2 templates, we are designing them to be available even though you would not be a tenant administrator, which is possible with this engine. So more on details on that one on Ignite timeframe, most likely. Oliver has a good question on the modern task lists in SharePoint. Any news on the modern task list in SharePoint? You're not a list person, though, John. So you're a web part person.
Well, that's okay. Our task solution, quite honestly, is we have a great team in Planner that focuses on tasks and has integration with Microsoft To Do, which also has integration with Outlook. That is our future-facing task solution. So the Planner team has built a full implementation of the Planner boards, as well as the analytics views for Planner boards, all as they run the exact same code. Their React code is also wrapped as a web part and is available on any team site. So if you were to come, I'm not sure that I have a Planner board set up here, but we'll look to see if I do. So this is a Planner board for this particular team. And this is what I was talking about, right? So you've got your Kanban style board with a bunch of rich content. If I come back to the website instead of jumping out, and I can actually add a Planner board as a page in my site. I could also put it as a web part on this page, but for the purposes of the demo, let's just show this alternate model. So I'm going to say new plan. And here, instead of a new plan, I'm going to use an existing plan instead. And I'm going to get a drop down, and we're going to show, and I've got an option here to create it in, show it in Site Nav. I'm going to create that page. And now I've added that project board and the tasks associated to it as a tab in my team site. So it's leveraging the Planner service, which, as I mentioned, integrates with To Do and with the Outlook calendar, as well as their mobile app. But now I've also added it to my team site.
And also maybe one thing related on this context, when you design this kind of a cool-looking team site and cool-looking page, you can absolutely surface all of these pages in Microsoft Teams in a snap of a finger, because we have that full SharePoint Teams integration. So if people prefer the Microsoft Teams look and view directly on these modern pages with the modern capabilities and fluent SharePoint experiences, you can easily do that as well.
Absolutely. That's a good demo I should have done, Vesa. Thank you.
Not a problem. Not a problem. We'll do it better in Ignite. No, just
okay. Other questions that people have?
We have 4 minutes.
I think actually Planner has pretty rich APIs, Mike. I'm
yes,
not super versed in them, but when you're asking about having a way to bulk create regularly scheduled tasks, I know I've worked with a number of MVPs that have created a site design which calls and adds a number of elements as they create a site, and then they create a Planner board with particular Kanban columns, etc. So I'd be curious what's not working there, and then ask you to definitely submit it to the Planner team, because they're constantly trying to improve their service.
Any news on modern calendar? Do you want to? Let's tackle that. And I'm going to move back on the slides already. But
okay, take over.
Do you want to talk about that one just briefly?
Yeah, the short answer is we do have a number of varied requests in user voice. I saw someone ask earlier, how does user voice influence our backlog? It absolutely influences our backlog. I showed a slide at SPC where I had gone through and shown all of the elements that we had looked at from user voice and how they had prioritized into the boom, it's done category, or quite honestly, if it's an area we're not investing. So a number of people had asked about, we really want script editor because we want unmanaged script on random pages. And I had to say, no, we just don't intend to invest in that area. As it relates to calendar, there are a myriad of different requests. They're definitely something that we're thinking about. The bar, when we looked at it as we rolled out the events part about 2 years ago, when we did user testing, the bar needed to be from the users we brought in exactly like Outlook, not some random calendar, not some open source control, but Outlook. So we've spent some time working with Outlook on potentially leveraging Outlook components in SharePoint, but at the moment they're really focused on a couple of other things. So we know it's important, and we'd love to understand the specific scenarios. So at the moment, I've broken them into sort of 3 large buckets, like just a calendar view on top of events. So just give me a wall calendar. Then there's I would like a wall calendar on the group calendar part. And there's, I would like full integration between Outlook, Exchange, and SharePoint, again, like you used to do in 2010. That third one is likely not getting done. The first two, absolutely understand that you want that. If there are other elements of a calendar web part, I'd encourage you to add it to the thread in user voice, or you're welcome to send it to me directly in email if you have some good detail that you'd like to make sure we understand.
Excellent. And just to reiterate, John, on what you were saying, related on the fact that we obviously have a dependency on the Outlook people, and this is really where we're heading in the Microsoft 365 or Office 365 level. All of these teams are specialists on their own area. The calendar is a functionality, and email is a functionality of Outlook. As an example, we own the modern pages experiences, regardless where the modern pages are being surfaced, because we want to implement the best possible end-user driven experience. And not replicate or implement the same experience in multiple locations, which makes sense, doesn't it? Right? If anybody was able to follow up on what I was saying. Cool. Radio silence. Okay. Let's actually close up. We're hitting the hour. So the next SharePoint Framework community call is actually on this Thursday. So this is the public call around SharePoint Framework, the client-side development. We do have 2 community demos queued up already for that one. And the following SharePoint General Dev community call is a week from there, 19th of September. And the next monthly community call is on 8th of October. And we have DC Pador already queued up for that one. DC owns the footer and header and the modern pages, some of the modern pages experiences, so or communication sites. But anyway, related on the modern experiences, and we'll talk more about the agenda items closer to the calls as well. But thank you, John. Really great demos.
Hey, thanks for having me, and thanks for the great questions, everyone. And you guys have a great day.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. And the recording will be available in the YouTube channel within 24 hours. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.